Good afternoon, and welcome to the City Club of Portland, Oregon's premier citizens forum. We're delighted you're with us today. I'm Don Williams, president of City Club. Our speaker today is Carlos Kalmar, music director of the Oregon Symphony. His topic, Orchestrating the Future of the Oregon Symphony. The oldest orchestra west of the Mississippi looks forward. For the benefit of our radio and television audiences, please turn off your cell phones or other electronic devices that break into song or classical strains. First, a few announcements. Our speaker next Friday will be Fred Hansen, General Manager of TriMet. His topic, Challenges and Opportunities in Portland Metro Area Public Transportation. He'll discuss public safety concerns, skyrocketing fuel prices, traffic congestion, and the increased demand for both more bus lines and more frequent service. We're also pleased to announce the previous Friday forum, which was Michael Schellenberger's program on the death of environmentalism, will be rebroadcast on C-SPAN Radio Sunday, December 9th at 8 a.m. And as a reminder, each week you can catch the rebroadcast of the Friday forum on Oregon Public Broadcasting at 7 in the evening, KPBS 1450 a.m. at 9 a.m. on Saturday, and rebroadcasts are also shown on Portland Community Media channels 30 and 11, and of course you can also download from our website, the City Club website. In just about 4 hours, City Club will host a holiday-themed open house, and members and their guests are invited to the final Friday at City Club Commons between 4:30 and 6. And the event is free, open to the public, and no reservations are required. Join me in welcoming our new City Club members. We have Leslie Perret, Community Relations Manager at the Discovery Center. Leslie? Speaking of new members, if you're looking for a holiday gift that continues to give all year round, consider a City Club membership. Many City Club members first became civically engaged when their parent or a friend gave them a membership. Based on my own experience, I know it's very much appreciated. And you recently received a copy of our annual report in the mail, and I'd really ask you to take a look at that report, look at the scope and the quality of the activities set forth in the document, and I think you'll be very proud of our organization. To purchase a membership today, you can talk to them at the back table, and they'll help you out. We're also very fortunate to have terrific corporate sponsors for this program, and this quarter's sponsors are Girding Edlin Development and the law firm of Barron Liebman LLP. Please join me in thanking them. Famous cellist Yo-Yo Ma recently stated, "Classical music is one of the best things to ever happen to mankind. If you get introduced to it the right way, it becomes your friend for life." Unfortunately, data from the National Endowment for the Arts show that classical music audience is getting older. It isn't being replaced by enough young people. A number of orchestras face structural deficits. For example, the Baltimore Symphony has used 1/3 of its endowment fund to pay off its accumulated deficit. Some assert the most pressing problem is just a diminished interest in classical music, and this trend has led to a decline in ticket sales. Critics say orchestras need to try something new. They should be thinking about how to approach new and younger audiences. Conversely, an article in the Sunday New York Times last year was entitled, "Check the Numbers. Rumors of classical music's demise are dead wrong." Well, what about the Oregon Symphony? Like many similar organizations, including its Seattle counterpart, the Symphony has also struggled with finances and a declining attendance. However, under Carlos Kalmar's leadership, players, audience members, and critics describe the symphony's overall sound as dramatically improved. After a multi-year search, the symphony installed a new president this past summer. Symphony musicians are described as energized by the fresh faces in the orchestra ranks. The Oregon Symphony was established more than 100 years ago, and it has been recognized for its internationally acclaimed music directors, its skilled performers, its diverse programs, and its outstanding community service and education. With 76 full-time musicians, the symphony now ranks among the largest orchestras in the nation. Carlos Kalmar was appointed music director of the symphony in 2003. He's also principal conductor of the Grant Park Music Festival in Chicago. Previously, he was music director of 4 other major symphonies internationally. To say Mr. Kalmar is well-traveled would be a gross understatement. His international conducting appearances have included Germany, Spain, Austria, Japan, and Switzerland, to name just a few. He was born in Uruguay, and he showed an interest in music at an early age and started playing the violin at age 6. By age 15, his music development led him to the Vienna Academy of Music. Mr. Kalmar resides in Portland and Vienna with his wife Britta and 2 daughters. Now, as a conductor, he's been described as gutsy and precise, athletically vigorous, and this is my favorite from the New York Post, positively liberated with grit and propulsion. The hills are indeed alive with the sound of music for Mr. Kalmar. When he first arrived in Oregon 4 years ago, and when his travel schedule permits, he hikes and rafts in the Oregon wilderness. Now, also, according to informed sources, he's a member of an informal organization called the Rusties. What are the Rusties? Well, as a hobby, Carlos and several other Portland arts leaders in the Rusties will jam together on their classical instruments, and rumor has it he still plays a mean violin. Thomas Lauderdale, who I believe is in the audience today, of Pink Martini, recently stated, "Under the leadership of conductor Carlos Kalmar, we believe the Oregon Symphony is on its way to becoming one of the very best orchestras in the United States." Please welcome our speaker.
It is such a pleasure for me to be here, and thank you very much for having me. I am allowed to speak about the future of the Oregon Symphony in conjunction with the city of Portland and the state of Oregon. And to do so, let me just, first of all, take a little step back and reflect for a couple of moments on the importance of music overall and on the importance of classical music in particular. What is music and what does music to all of us? Since I was, I would say, a student, I thought about what music means to me and how I understand what I'm doing and the bigger project of just, is it a skill? Is it an art form? Or what is it? Why do we all really like music, regardless of whether it is heavy metal, jazz, classical, pops, you name it? I think we all share something in common. And I believe very strongly that we like it because music is a language. And in our day and age where we have understood that English is a language that everybody on this planet speaks, still we have sometimes difficulties to understand each other even though we articulate ourselves in this language. However, the good news is if you articulate yourself in music, you have the ability of transporting a lot of things to an audience, to a different person, to your neighbor, and I would even argue to yourself. And the good news is what you are transporting doesn't even need a translation. I think that music has a very specific role as being a language because whenever, together with the Oregon Symphony, I am there on the podium in front of an audience and there is a lot of energy, cheerfulness, laughter, sadness in the music, the reaction by the audience might be very individualistic. What I mean by that is, yes, we all speak one language, but what the language means to each one of you and even to myself might be very different, and it's not really the point to translate what it means. The important is we are communicating through our brain, our heart, and our soul through music. Think about this. What does music to the individual if it is a part of our life? Music, I think, is very important for each and every one of us because we have two possibilities to have an encounter with music. One is actively and one is not actively. If you're actively involved in music, it means you play an instrument, and it doesn't really matter whether you play an instrument on the amateur level or you're a professional. You just use the music to express something that is inside yourself, and I think that is one of the most important things in humanity. I think that also music brings together families. Imagine what it means to you when, as I have, for example, the pleasure, you are able to sit at home and all of a sudden one of your daughters comes to you and says, "Hey, Dad, I want to sing this song." And it doesn't really matter whether, because that is really a fact of life in my life, it doesn't really matter whether it's a song by Britney Spears or Franz Schubert. It is just a way of getting together on a different level with my daughter, and I think that all of us who have this experience know what I'm talking about. But it goes beyond that. What does music overall mean for a community like ours here in Portland? And I think the important side is, if nothing else, just think that music for us is a way of gathering and sharing something in common. The emotion of sitting in a concert hall, the challenge sometimes of listening to chamber music, the pleasure of going together to the opera. But it goes beyond that. Just reflect for one moment what it would mean to all of us if our life would have absolutely no music. Have you ever thought about how much music there is in our life on our days? And I would even argue some of this music we don't even realize. Well, I realize that very often because I have this habit of going into restaurants and saying immediately, "Turn down the volume, please." But overall, let's just think for a moment, how do we get up in the morning? I assume that many of us have an alarm clock, which is a radio, and either you get up listening to the news or you listen to music. It's the first thing you hear in the morning. While you have breakfast, there might be music. I'm one of these people who has repeatedly said, and it's a sheer fact of life, whenever I sit in the car, there is music. Imagine wherever you go into a restaurant, wherever you go, and there is something that you can buy, a shop, a supermarket. There is music all over the place. And just reflect for one moment, how would our life be if none of that would be there? If all we can get is sheer silence and we can only communicate through the spoken word. I very strongly believe that then there would be a substantial loss of quality in our life. Now, going just maybe in one little sentence from music overall to classical music, I want just to focus for one sentence on the fact that if we get exposure to classical music, we all benefit because of the purity of the product. And there are, on our day and age, wonderful resources and research has been done that prove that the effect of specifically classical music on the human brain is very, very positive. It starts with childhood, but it never ends. Music accompanies us throughout our entire life. Now, I want to give you a little hint about what music has meant for me throughout my life. I was born in South America, and my parents came from Vienna and had to flee World War II. And my parents at my very early age realized that always when there is classical music, I was very attentive, and they got me to concerts, and one day they asked me whether I want to learn an instrument, and I of course said yes. I learned the violin, and music has been accompanying me, and I was as lucky as being able and allowed to get to be a professional musician. I might say this on occasion jokingly, but I mean this. From the perspective of a person like myself, who does music for a living, and for whom music is a part of what I do, listen, and actively do every single day, music is also an outlet. And if I think seriously about what kind of person would I have been if there would have been no music, or if I would have not succeeded in classical music, I might jokingly say I would have become one of those nervous nerds that you don't want to deal with, really neurotic, but it might sound like a joke, but I think it's true. Whenever I feel something inside of me that needs to get out, I can express it throughout music. The joy of being allowed to conduct, for example, a classically trained orchestra of the level of this wonderful Oregon Symphony is also an emotional outlet. And as I'm very often described, I'm kind of athletic and outgoing as a conductor. And this gets my emotions pouring out, and it helps me as a human being. And by doing so, I strongly believe that it does also help people around me, and it goes way beyond only the musicians I work with. It has also something to do with the audience who listens. And I have proof of that through numerous encounters with people in the audience, both before and after concerts. There was a time in my life, in around 2002, and I want to picture this a little bit for a second so you understand what brought me to this city and why did I think it would be a very good idea for me to come to Portland. So please understand, where was I at that time? In 2002, I had been working as a music director already in 4 different orchestras in German-speaking countries. Matter of fact, at that time, I was the music director of 1 out of the 4 major symphony orchestras that we have in Vienna. Vienna is a city that is about the size of Portland, and we have 4 major orchestras. Total, by the way, just to give a little explanation, we have 8 to 9 orchestras overall in the city of Vienna. So you just have a little perspective where I come from. The orchestra I was leading at that time had the main series, the subscription series, in the hall that is probably acoustically the best hall in the world and certainly one of the most beautiful. It's the Golden Hall in Vienna. And whenever you are either in the podium or in the dressing room of that hall, you're somewhat intimidated by your surroundings because you know that on the same podium you are now conducting, or in the same room where you change your clothes, there were other conductors. And I'm not talking here about Bernstein or Karajan, I'm talking about Johannes Brahms, Richard Strauss, Gustav Mahler, just to name a few. It's kind of, that was my surrounding. And that was my life at that time. So why on earth did I even think of leaving that job when there was even an offer on the table for me to extend my contract beyond 2003? I was approached by the chair of the board and the president of the Oregon Symphony about that time, and came here to Portland and just had a couple of talks to specifically members of the board, and encountered an orchestra of a very interesting point in their life. And I would say it was also a very interesting point in my personal life at that time. See, from the perspective of a conductor, I believe very strongly, I have two main interests when I conduct in becoming a music director. One is I want to communicate very well with the audience and become a member of the community. And second, I want to have around myself an orchestra with whom we all, and me very strongly included, can grow together, artistically and in any human possible way. And that was exactly what I saw at that time would be possible in Portland. I mean, I don't have to tell you this, because you have been in Portland longer than I have been, but you are all very, I would say, individualistic people. And this was kind of a very good fit for me. If we all look just out of the window, well, today the weather is very Portland, but this is a city with beautiful outdoors, and I know that we all share in common that we would like to go and hike. Well, this is the place to do this. This, as I would say, as opposed to other cities in America where I have been, and this is not a criticism, looks a little to me more like a European style city, because the downtown where we are currently now is not dead after 6 p.m. because people actually live downtown, and this is buzzing. And me coming from Europe, that's exactly what I like. And I would say also what got immediately my attention is the cultural scene of Portland. That really brought me here, because I saw, well, there is an opera that is really getting better and better. There is a ballet with a very interesting new director, and he has proven to do fantastic work. There are other organizations which are important, and the overall impression is very, very positive. And now I have to get to the point which really is probably the key for me why I came here, which is the orchestra. I found here an orchestra of a very good level, but very, very keen to get to another different level. And I thought, well, throughout the first encounter when we did a concert together, the way I described the members of the Oregon Symphony was they are very hungry and they like to be challenged. And this idea, to me, was exactly what I thought would be right when I pursue this dream for me of getting together and growing. So I left my job in Vienna and came here. And until now, I must say, the miracle has already happened. We are definitely not there, but the miracle has happened because even if I say it, I think there will be very little argument in saying that the orchestra is artistically playing the best ever. And this is thanks to the real commitment of every single musician. But what I also liked about the members of the orchestra here is their commitment not only to their work with conductors like me, it goes beyond that. Members of this orchestra, and over 4 years I can very proudly say, myself included, can be seen overall in Portland working with other groups. There is Third Angle, Fiona Music. We have 2 wonderful youth orchestras where members of the orchestra play and coach, and so on. I think this is just an environment we all like to be. On a very personal level, I want to just have one sentence to say. There has been a perception here and there, because there was already mentioning of my very tight travel schedule, that I'm not here in Portland enough. I just want you to understand 2 things. One, this life that I have, meaning I'm here and sometimes I'm not here, is just the life of an international conductor in our day and age. I'm just a very average conductor in that regard. Secondly, and this is, I would say, the key for me just to communicate, coming to Portland now is for me something very emotional. I have a home here, and every time I have the pleasure of flying here and looking out the window, in case the weather is different from today, and seeing Mount Hood or Mount St. Helens while we approach Portland, I have this feeling, finally, I can get home. I'm not here to visit. I like it here. Now, what do we do at the Oregon Symphony, and what do we intend to do in the future? I mentioned already the importance of music overall, so let me just take a little step further. I think the importance of classical music and exposure to classical music starts with our childhood. And Oregon Symphony has done a phenomenal job in providing for that. We are currently in an environment that, sadly enough, funds for arts education in our school system in Oregon have been cut, and there is very little arts education there. So somebody has to step in, and as much as we can do, we do that. There are singular musicians, little group of musicians who go into schools. Next to that, the benefit for adults, and in numerous ways, the contributions of the orchestras. You can come to concerts. You can come to kinder concert with your children. You can come again, just focusing on their education with your children. We have petting zoos for the instruments, by the way. There are musicians who participate in the community's life overall, so we get a great exposure. Oregon Symphony is an absolute centerpiece in the thriving cultural scene here in Portland. We are now, as Oregon Symphony, working together with the ballet, with the opera, something that might some 6 to 10 years ago be unheard, because of course there is competition. We are all in the classical music scene, but all of a sudden we just thought it would be a great idea to work together with them. And this is not only in regards, for example, to the last Waterfront concert, it goes on. In the next year, when we have a choral work, just to give you one example, when we open the next season at Oregon Symphony with a choral work that requires 4 soloists, 2 of them will be members of the Portland Opera. So that's how we work together. Whenever we want to have a spoken word on stage, the first people we approach is Portland Center Stage. So we have this idea of being very, very inclusive. Next to that, as there is another side to us at the Oregon Symphony, how we provide for all of you. We have a series called Inside the Score. Inside the Score, we tackle one single piece, we go in depth. Why was it written? How does it work? What's the background? There are numerous approaches to this idea. And when somebody goes to these now very popular concert, then you don't only have the enjoyment of hearing a piece that you might be very familiar with, you also go home not only with the pleasure of a wonderful performance, but with a certain knowledge about why was it written and why did it turn out to be the way the composer wrote it. And then we have this wonderful series called The Pops. Now, The Pops is a miracle for me. I don't know if you have ever thought about this, but just one thought about the Pops. When we all are together listening to classical music, it doesn't really matter to us whether it's the music of Claudio Monteverdi, written 1600, or the music of Richard Strauss, written after 1900. We cover a range of 350 to 400 years, and nobody's going to argue. In Pops, there is this phenomenon that I observed here in this wonderful city of Portland, that people who like the 50s might not go to a concert that features the music of the 70s. And now when you are there and try to build for your audience a program that includes several concerts, and you want to attract everybody and have a wonderful full house of happy customers, well, it's sometimes a little bit of a stretch that you have to, but we are working so hard in all of this. I also heard mentioning very, very often that we play towards an audience that gets older and older, and that the classical music scene is dying now in the 21st century. Two thoughts. First of all, no, it's not dying. The problem we encounter, let's not say it's a problem, a fact. The fact is, we now have way more concerts to choose from than we had 40 years ago. Wherever I go, specifically in the summer, for example, there is another festival I've never heard of, and they are fabulous musicians with interesting programs, and I want to go to all of them. So there is, I would say, there is way more than there was before. And I just think this is very, very important for all of us. Now, why do the young people between ages 20 to 35 come very rarely to us? We have been exploring this over and over. Well, first of all, there is this issue of intimidation. And we at the Oregon Symphony are working very, very hard to get over this. Imagine you're a young kid, and the least thing you want to do when you go to have a good time with your friend is to dress up. You don't want to do that. Next to that, you go into a concert hall and you have to sit and shut up. Then comes on stage a wonderful array of people, and they are all dressed in black. That might not be very appealing. So we all at the Oregon Symphony have been thinking about this. How can we approach this? And probably the best way and the solution for this is to approach it by using smaller number of musicians. Instead of bringing the audience of young people to us, bring the orchestra to the audience. And I just say that in a very general way, because one thing has to be said here, which is, let us never deny, in our case, what we are as the Oregon Symphony. Because we are a symphony orchestra, we are not a pops band. The Oregon Symphony currently encounters a lot of challenges. And the financial challenge is, of course, the key to all of this. And again, one sentence about my background coming from Europe. I've been working 16 years as music director in Europe in environments, regardless of the country, where the government provides for the culture. To say it a little bluntly and overstating, I didn't have to care about ticket sales. I didn't have to care about size of orchestra. If the concert hall is half empty because I only play music of the 20th century, no harm done. The government takes care of me anyway. And then I come to us. And here, and the Oregon Symphony is just one example and encounters exactly the same problem as everybody else in the country. The money with which we can operate comes from private sector, from corporate. The government, although they give money, that is not money as substantial as we would all need. What does the Oregon Symphony do to tackle this? Because, to tell you the truth, of course we are operating at a deficit. And just because there was the mentioning of Baltimore Symphony, no, we will not get into our endowment and pay off our debt. That's not something that we will consider in the future. So what do we do to make sure that we are here? One of the things is we reduce our costs as much as we can. We try to mainstream, with the help of our new president, Elaine Calder, who is doing a phenomenal job in that. We try to reduce a little bit the number of staff members, and we'll work really very, very hard in selling more tickets, because we have a wonderful hall with a great number of seats, and we are trying to fill them every single day. And by the way, we are doing a very, very good job if you compare it to other orchestras throughout the country. Another thing that we are doing on our day is we work very, very strongly together in designing programs. We listen to our audience. We have several talks to audience members in the sense, okay guys, what do you want to hear from us? What is important to you? Programs designed for the Oregon Symphony, regardless whether pops, inside the score or classical series, are not being designed by the music director alone in his cubicle, although it is my responsibility to sign off on those. It is a joint effort, and I'm very, very happy to tell you that we at the Oregon Symphony are definitely working as a team, and we are getting stronger and stronger. I think it is important for you to hear it from me, that despite all the financial challenges that we are encountering, we are having here in Oregon, with the Oregon Symphony, an orchestra we all can be very, very proud of. There is one little problem with that, which is the Oregon Symphony. If I look at the United States and the orchestras which play here, we are one of the best kept secrets in our environment of the classical music. But just to quote colleagues of mine, guest conductors come to us, and when they come repeatedly, last week there was a Finnish colleague of mine here, and she said, I can't believe the progress this orchestra has made in the last 2 years. Guest artists want to come to us. Players apply for the Oregon Symphony and want to become musicians in our orchestra, and just look around at the last changes we had in our symphony orchestra. Phenomenal first flute, wonderful, talented new concertmaster, just to name a few. Well, this comes because we are capable of playing a very, very special level. There are composers who want to work with us, and to very great success, because it is our policy at the Oregon Symphony that first of all we want to feature composers who come and live here in Oregon. And that is why last year we premiered a piece by Robert Keir, who is a wonderful teacher at the University of Oregon. And next year we are going to feature another one, but I'm not allowed to tell you who it is. But we are working towards that. When I came to Oregon, and I was always interested in learning something about this community, many people said that once upon a time, I think, I quote it right, there was a governor who created this wonderful sentence, "Please come visit, but don't stay." I would say on our days, the sentence could be altered. Please come and please stay. We are a community that has so many things to offer. And one of the key pieces that we have to offer is our culture, our cultural scene here. And in this cultural scene, the Oregon Symphony is one of the keys, if not probably, arguably, from the classical music, the most important. And we are working very hard to secure this. And I think regarding the future of the Oregon Symphony, it is very important that we spread out the word that we have now become a wonderful artistic institution. We want to work towards getting into the recording studio again. Yes, we want to be ambassadors for both the city of Portland and the state of Oregon, both in the US as well as abroad. It is so vital that we tour. And therefore, for all of that, we are working all together, the president, the chair of the board, every single musician, all the members of the staff, together with our community, to secure the future of the Oregon Symphony, because that is part of the future of this wonderful city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kalmar. Now we're at our question and answer period, and asking questions is a privilege of City Club membership. Please limit your question to 30 seconds or less and make it intellectual. Now, if you're curious, an intellectual is someone who can listen to the William Tell Overture and not think of the Lone Ranger. Today's first question will be asked by our board host, Marge Kafori. Marge directed the Portland Office of Government Relations for 19 years and is a lobbyist and political consultant. She's also a member of the board of Portland Center Stage. She received the City Club President's Award for her work on political debates and joined the City Club in 1980. Marge?
Thank you, John, and thank you, Mr. Kalmar, for speaking to us today. It may be generational, but I've always looked at a conductor as sort of the functional equivalent of a rock star, and so we're very happy to have you here today. My question is this: do you think that younger people are losing interest in classical music, or does it just seem to be more acute in areas where classical music education is not provided in schools?
Well, I think that if we stop, like we have, providing classical music, arts education in general in school, we will pay for this in the future. On a very personal level, I think this has been a dreadful idea, wherever it is. By the way, just to correct one perception, because I try to be here in a way very clear and to the point, and maybe that is being understood as a little bit of a political statement. Just to make this clear, things are not that great in Europe either. Just to clear this misconception, I think to secure the future of our heartwarming society, cultivated society, it is absolutely important that we still keep doing what we are doing, and it all starts in the school system.
Hi, Carlos. I'm Tom Cirillo, and some of you might know I'm the Executive Director of Portland Baroque Orchestra, and I'm going to ask a question that's really purely musical, but hopefully no one here will get angry about it for my asking, particularly Elaine, and no one will hold you to this. But I imagine when you work with the orchestra, you have these dream projects sometimes, and with an orchestra, a symphony orchestra of about 75 or 80 people with limited resources, as we know, and the needs, as you put, and I applaud your work collaboratively programming, because that is so important, and that's something we do in our work. But what is that huge work that you would be inspired to do with this orchestra and this community? If you knew that you could snap your fingers and everyone would come, what would you like to show us?
Oh, interesting enough. It's always wonderful to have questions you never would expect. Okay, it might sound politically correct, but it's even the truth. I have never been the kind of guy or conductor who is dreaming about stuff like Mahler 8, who nobody can play because we can't afford it. That's for me never the interesting point. Never, and never was. I'm always interested in designing the best program that I can with all the resources that I have. And just to make one point clear, yes, we all have been reading in the news, and I have been talking about this, about the strenuous financial situation in which we are. However, this does not limit our possibilities to create exciting program to the extent where I think that I have to think in a box. I think if you are an intelligent musician, you can create wonderful dishes with whatever there is in your refrigerator.
You are the artistic director of an administrator's dreams. Thank you.
Hi, Joanne Kahn, City Club member. I really appreciated your talking about introducing music in childhood and how things differ. What I'm wondering is kind of the modern age with shorter attention span, less time, more a tendency to multitask. Do you see classical music responding to some of the changes in society in terms of the pace and the way people conduct their lives?
Well, I think I said it before in a very different context. We should never deny what we are. And you can argue with me for hours whether what we do, Tom does, for example, the same, is we maintain a museum, and it's not a living experience. My argument is still, and will always be, that the experience of going to a concert is something that is very, very live and touches you in a very deep way. Are we missing the point as our society is changing? I think we are not missing the point. We are sticking to what we are. We can't deny what we are. You know, there have been several attempts, good attempts, by the way, of doing crossovers. Of course, we see youngsters going to pops. I mean, Britney Spears, heavy metal, you name it. We have a wonderful group, just to name, aside from Pink Martini, a wonderful group here in Portland, the Decemberists. Yes, they play with classically trained orchestras, but you cannot base what you do solely on that. You cannot deny what you are. And I think in the very, very end, even though I understand this as being a little bit of a conservative statement, that it is a good thing to preserve the best that we have in culture.
Mike Dennis, City Club member. I had two quick questions. First, if you could share with us what performance halls or facilities you think Portland may need going forward in the next 5 or 10 years. And secondly, it was disturbing to read today that Nordstrom's department store has fired all of their live pianists to replace them with piped-in recorded music. I was wondering if you could dissect this a little bit for us and explain what's going on with our culture. Thank you.
Poor guys at Nordstrom's. In the future, what we need to do here in Portland in terms of venues is we need to do the very best that we can with the venues that we have. In the very, very back of our mind, of course there is at some point the dream of a new hall, because as a matter of fact, I have encountered here in Portland from the very first moment I came until this day, there is one hall probably missing here. It doesn't mean that we miss a concert hall. There is too much going on in this city, and we don't have enough venues. And of course, the first thing that comes to my mind is, let's build another venue. And maybe let's make it another concert hall that we can use for several purposes. Because matter of fact of life is the Schnitzer, wonderful hall. For the purpose of a symphony orchestra, it is really on the big side. So that would be a dream. Now the idea of our colleagues at Nordstrom's, this is one of the very sad things that probably many of you who are here in the room encounter when you think about your business. Sometimes you have wonderful machines that over the course of years just cost way less than the human being. And although I do not really like to go into a department store and hear music overall, it's not something I care so deeply for I think it sends the completely wrong signal. Because the good news about having a live pianist at Nordstrom's, for example, is, and I've seen that, you can approach this person, talk to her or him. Sometimes you can even demand, can you play this title or that title? It is a human relationship. And now all of what you have is just a machine and probably a piano that does all the playing, but nobody's sitting there. It's not a great idea. I think, yes, human being costs money, but human beings are way more interesting than machines.
Hello, my name is Leslie Hildula, and I'm a City Club member. I wanted to ask some advice from you, parent to parent. How do we appropriately educate our children into music, guide them, help them explore interests and capabilities as either a listener or perhaps as a performer? I have a 6-year-old daughter, just to give you my context.
The first thing that I would say, parent to parent, the first thing you start doing is please, when you have a child that is barely this size, a baby, sing. Please sing. And don't be afraid if you think that your singing is not great. Doesn't matter. I remember that I sang with my children, so did my wife, even before they were born. And by doing, and one other thing that I just want, not even to correct, just say it. Please look at music being part of the life of education, not because of its intellectual implications. We have been reading about the fact that classical music specifically enhances your brain, specifically as a child? Well, one thought to that, to clear a misconception, no, classical music does not make you more intelligent. And second, to expose a child to music is not something you should do because of intellectual reasons. I personally think that why you do that is because the outcome is maybe your child then will be interested in music overall. Maybe your child then, because you have been singing, because you have been playing, even the radio if you don't play an instrument, will one day express an interest in playing a singular instrument. If the child does that from parent to parent, please do not think immediately, oh, I want to make my child a professional musician. It's not about that. Even if your child plays only 2 years piano or half a year of trumpet, it does it. And by having this skill as an amateur musician can communicate, and this goes, I believe, to social skills. And that is what is probably missing in our society, social skills. And that's why it is important that we start doing it very early.
Kurt Wabering, member. China is a growing economic power, and interestingly has a language which is tonal, and you know the language by context and so forth. And they have a different music tradition. I'm wondering what you can tell us about our interest in their music tradition and their interest in our music tradition.
Well, I can't speak really to that because I'm not an expert in that field. Bottom line for me, the most important thing is that there is exposure to music. There is a part of our world where the tradition, the non-Western world, the tradition comes from a very different idea of tonality than ours. And it might be, it's not the milk with which we were fed. So I can't speak to that because it's something, the bottom line is, it's something that I do not feel inside because I have Austrian parents. I grew up with guys like Mozart, and I grew up with piano and violin. I didn't grow up with arhu and other instruments I've heard when I was a really adult person. So I can't really speak to that. For me, the important is still exposure is what really matters.
We have time for one quick question.
Clifford Droke, a City Club member. Those of us, you've already spoken a bit to the selection of the musical programs. Those of us who attend, and that would be almost everyone in this room, perhaps everyone, notice that you often sandwich in a contemporary composer's work, sometimes quite challenging for the audience, between classical or romantic pieces. And I'm wondering what kind of feedback you get from people on that. Is this effectively expanding our musical vocabulary? What kinds of reactions are you getting? How do you measure the effect of this work, the new works?
I get mostly the answers I get about the programming, if I put everything in the context, and in the middle I put something challenging and 20th century, is very, very positive. I think the key to all of this is the context in which you program things, and whether there is a connection between pieces that you might not know and never heard even the name of a composer, and the piece you know in the same program. Just to give you one example, one of the upcoming concerts for the Oregon Symphony will be a piece you all know very, very well, the Midsummer Night's Music by Felix Mendelssohn. We all know the Wedding March and the Scherzo. Well, that is music about fairies, goblins, witches. So we pair that program with a piece that has never been played by the Oregon Symphony, is 21st century, and it's a marvelous piece of music that has a completely different approach to the idea of witches, and it's called The Confessions of Isabel Gowdy. I Trust, by James Macmillan, Scottish composer. Sorry that I didn't mention him. I Trust. If I program that singular piece, The Confessions of Isabel Gowdy, probably half of you wouldn't come to the concert because you think, never heard, don't like it, 20th century, probably ugly, dissonant. But in this case, the challenge is, yeah, but I want to hear my Mendelssohn, I love it so much. And trust me, the miracle will happen. You will adore the piece by Macmillan. Yes, it is somewhat modern in language, but the key to all of it is the context. We are going to have together a look at the idea of goblins and witches from two very different angles, with two very different results. And yes, I strongly believe that sometimes the role of classical music in programming has to be also challenging. Sometimes at the Oregon Symphony we come together and design a program that is fun. Sometimes we try to design a program that mostly goes towards the sad and dark colors of our lives. Sometimes we want to laugh together, and sometimes we just want two different angles to the same topic. And the response I get is very, very positive, and that makes me think that we are absolutely on the right track.
Carlos Kalmar, thank you for a wonderful talk. We're adjourned.